Okay, so I'm doing this partly because I want to and partly because someone asked me a question and I figured what the heck, let's go for a little gold here. Let's go the whole 9 yards. So we're going to be talking about particles, Japanese particles. What kinds there are, you know, some of the different things. We're not going to go in complete detail and cover everything because I can't do that and I really don't want to, and I don't think you want to either. It's not necessary for basic understanding of Japanese, and going beyond that is something that you need to do yourself through reading of grammar, you know, dictionaries, regular dictionaries, by actually just reading Japanese and that sort of thing. So anyway, we're going to talk about the basics here, and this is going to be a sort of introductory video. We're just going to give an overview of particles and different kinds and things like that, and later on we're going to talk about specific particles, maybe one or two at a time. So we're going to be using some definitions out of some different things here. One is this book, the Reikai Shinkokugo Jiten. Okay, this one, I like this. It's very good. Gives I would recommend if you can find it online or find it in Japan if you ever go there. Well, I know you can find it in Japan. It gives lots of examples and actually tells you the different accents of words that are, you know, the same spelling, that use the same kana, like the 3 different hashi. I'm using this guy, Nihongo Daijiten, some definition right here, comparing those, using this to kind of help out with some understanding, essentials of Japanese verbs, essentials, and grammar, whatever the heck it says. I can't remember the title, and I think I screwed it up. And we'll also be using this one, the Dictionary of Basic Japanese Grammar, as well as an intermediate and advanced if necessary. But most of the particles aren't here. So if you don't have this and you're studying Japanese, get this book. It's not 100%. I mean, even when I was looking at, like, for example, wa, everybody's dreaded wa and ga. Everything in here doesn't seem completely practical to me on those two, just those two subjects, but for basic understanding, you can't beat this. You really cannot beat this. I read this 3 times while I was in Japan studying Japanese, and it really helped a lot. Okay, and then as far as we're not going to be using a textbook, because textbook are trying to teach you. These are just trying to give definitions, and yeah, they're still people's opinions, and they have different ideas, but all those references, comparing them will help. I think will help us to come to some sort of conclusion on these particles. But I will be using this as a reference as well, Classical Japanese by Haruo Shirane, because, well, it gives good perspective even though it's classical Japanese. Okay, so first thing we need to know when we're learning about particles is, one, that they are all well, that there's different kinds. Okay, and you can see the same particle, put that in quotes, because it has different functions. Like ga. Ga is a subject marker, people call it. It's kind of hard to put. We're going to, but I might make up some of my own terms here because I think they'll be easier to understand. Because we throw these, you know, we just throw English grammar and European grammar on Japanese, and it doesn't always fit. In fact, the grammar explanations don't always even fit all the European languages, or even Indo-European languages for that matter. So, but yeah, ga has different functions. It can be different kinds. It can do different things in a sentence. It's not just a case particle, as I'm sure most people, or subject marker, as most people know, I'm sure. So we're going to go through and we're going to talk about those different kinds of particles. First of all, there's more than I'm going to talk about, but we're just going to do basic overview, the essential things that you need to know if you're trying to learn Japanese. Okay? Because more than that, you can study it by yourself. You should study it by yourself. You should read grammars. You should read. You can read textbooks if you want. You read linguistic analysis. And I think one of the best of all is to actually just read. Just read literature, because you'll then be able to not rely on someone else's opinion or idea of what the particle does. It's a good idea to know that to help you get perspective, and so you're not completely off base with the meaning, but it's better to have your own idea in your to form your own definition in your mind of what the particle or what anything does, the particle, grammar, word, whatever, what it does, how it's used. So, but we're going to talk about a few different kinds here. Okay, so we're going to talk about there's interjectory particles, and hopefully I can speak English correctly here. Interjectory particles like yo and zo, and yeah, ones like that, interjections. There are sentence final particles, and interjectory particles do come at the end of a sentence often, but sentence final particles are like ka, ne, and like kana or kashira or whatever, things like that. Then we have adverbial particles. Whoops. Then we have adverbial particles, which do basically like an adverb. They work like an adverb in that they, change they affect the verb, the meaning of the verb. There's words like bakari and stuff. And actually one of these, I'd never actually even thought about this way before, but one of these dictionaries that I'm using says that it's called wa an adverbial particle. So I thought that was interesting. Then we have conjunctive particles like kara, node, ga, things like that link clauses. Okay, and then we have the most important and probably one of the most misunderstood and hardest to understand, because there's such subtle differences between them, is the case particles. Now, if anybody doesn't know what case is, well, let's say this first. First thing we got to know before we talk about case, that's what we're going to focus on most, especially right now, case particles. And I just give a short introduction to them here. Well, case particles in Japanese deal with the verb, because the verb in Japanese is the most important part of the sentence. In Japanese, it's all about the verb. The verb, lots of times in English speakers, and I think part of the reason is because, at least because of the way that I was taught grammar when I was in or not taught grammar, I guess, in elementary school, is that we're not taught about how English works, at least, right? We feel because we always have to have a verb in English, and well, almost anyway, and not a verb, I'm sorry. We almost always have to have a subject, and so it almost is like we feel like the subject is slave to the verb is slave to the subject. So like our subject is the most important thing in our sentence, we feel like, and that you can't transfer that to Japanese. Okay, Japanese, the verb, especially the last verb, the verb at the end of the sentence, the main verb, is the most important thing in the sentence, because everything else in there is expressed in relation to that verb. Okay, and that's what case particles are. And conjunctive particles, and that sort of can be said to do the same thing, I would say. Now, some people might argue with me with that, which would be fine. Maybe they'll prove me wrong. That's okay. But case particles, definitely. Not always to the verb at the end of the sentence, but they are always show relation to the verb, to their verb. Okay, whether it be in a clause or whether it be the main clause or a subordinate clause, they always show relation to a verb. Okay. Tempted to say they show relation to other things in the sentence, but no, they just show relation to the verb, and we'll see that as we go through them. But that is one of the most important things to remember, okay? Because we're going to start going through case particles. They show relation to the verb. When you're wondering about the difference between wa and ga, same thing. They show it's about the verb, okay? It's not about, and they do carry, some of them do carry their own nuances, like wa, and some people say ga does. I'm tempted to argue that, but we'll talk about that later. Okay, so we'll just leave it at that. And that'll be our introduction. This is how we're gonna do it. We'll probably start off with case particles and go through them one or two at a time, figure out what's going on, explain it to you. Hopefully you can understand it. Thank you.